So, we're delighted that Reverend Dwight Moody is here, and we have a small circle of folks here to engage in a conversation. So, we're going to begin, and Dwight, thank you for being here.
I'm delighted to be here, remembering fondly our visit here 3 years ago, Alan says, and we're delighted to be back and look forward to coming back again.
Very good, very good. So tell us a little bit about yourself. For those that don't know, I'm fascinated with your story right up to the present moment, because there is, as we talked last night, in your life a major transition now. But prior to that major transition, we'll get to that, what was your life like? What were you doing? What brought you joy?
Well, I grew up in Kentucky. My dad was a minister, and really my mom was a minister. Had she been living today, she would have been ordained and working in a church and recognized. But back in the 50s, women were not recognized in that way. And so she had a career as a counselor, and my dad as a congregational minister. And I grew up loving the church. At the age of 15, I announced my call to the ministry, something that I have loved doing all of my life. I went to college, I went to seminary. My wife and I spent a year living in Israel, living on Mount Zion, and I've been back many times. This is why the artwork that we talked about last night up there behind you meant so much to me. And so in my work as a congregational minister, I've pastored a church in Indiana, and then in Pittsburgh, and then in Kentucky, and then for about 11 years I taught on the faculty of the Liberal Arts College, religion and associated things. And then for about another 10 years I led an organization, national organization called the Academy of Preachers. And we had festivals for young preachers all over the country, involving the widest spectrum of Christian people, Christian ministers. They were Orthodox and Catholic and evangelical and Protestant and Pentecostal, liberal, conservative, male and female, even gay and straight. So it was a very diverse. We only ask that you have a call to ministry, call to preach, and a mentor who would come with you to the festivals, and we would gather 100, 150 young people, and they would all preach. We gave them 15 minutes to preach, which, if you know the Christian community, that was twice as long as a Catholic student needed to preach, but not half as long as the Pentecostals needed.
Right, I was going to ask you about that. So when you say you're in the Christian tradition, what particular part of that tradition do you place yourself in?
Well, I grew up in Southern evangelical, white Southern Baptist. So I grew up during the Civil Rights Movement, but our white churches were not involved in that, you know. Since then, I've gotten more and more open, more and more liberal on almost every issue. And so I retired, moved moved further south, and then I got involved in this little church in Hendersonville for 3.5 years. And then this happened.
This meaning?
I'm going to explain what happened. Trump came along, Donald J. Trump, and gathered up the support of Christians, the majority of Christians, not just evangelicals, but Catholics. The majority of Catholics, white Catholics, the majority of white Protestants voted for Trump and are part of the Trump support system. Like many people, I found this atrocious. I could not understand it because I feel like not only the long history of his personal life, but also the policies that he articulated and his whole style of speaking rudeness and confrontational and criticizing people. I found in all of these ways that this person could not represent what we think of as not only the best of being an American, but the best of what it means to be a follower of Jesus Christ. And as I tried to articulate this in the little church where I was pastoring, I got pushback.
Tell us about that.
Okay, churches represent, almost every church is a mixture, a political mixture. And you've traditionally had both Democrats and Republicans in a congregation. So ministers have to be very careful what they say. And this was particularly true back in the civil rights movement. Ministers who wanted to support the civil rights movement, they had to be very careful about going too far because their white constituency would push back, and many ministers lost their jobs over it.
Right, that's really the ultimate fear, isn't it?
You
lose your livelihood.
You lose your livelihood, and your calling is diminished, and you're in many ways marginalized as a leader in the Christian community. You don't want this. So ministers, not only on political issues, but on other issues, you have to navigate. You have to be tactful, and you have to decide, do I really want to address this issue? Do I want to challenge my people to do this? And they don't really teach you too much about this in seminary, but it's really one of the things you have to learn how to do. I can't tell you, when I grew up in tobacco country, Kentucky, and every church I was in Kentucky, there were tobacco growers and many tobacco users. As a matter of fact, my dad was the minister down there in West Kentucky, and it was very common between Sunday school and church for people to go outside and stand on the street corner and the steps of the church and smoke.
True.
Then I went to Pittsburgh. Well, let me just say this. You could smoke in public, but you had to drink in private. That was West Kentucky. Then I became pastor of a church in Pittsburgh years later, and it was just the opposite. Drinking was permissible in public, but if you wanted to be a smoker, in the closet. It was kind of a humorous flip of what was accepted and what wasn't. But I remember when I came from Pittsburgh back to West Kentucky to pastor a church, and one of the first columns I wrote was about drugs, the use of drugs. And I included in the list of drugs tobacco. Unbeknownst to me, the #1 tobacco warehouse owner in the county was a member of the church. I did not know this. And the next day, after I wrote this article, an elderly woman came to me in the church and said, you don't know, evidently, that so-and-so in our church owns the biggest tobacco barn, where they would sell the tobacco. And he said to us that if the new preacher down at the church doesn't want his money, he'll take it to one of the county churches and they'll appreciate it. That was said to me. Now that wasn't necessarily a political issue, Democrat and Republican, but it was the issue of tobacco. And this comes up. So ministers have to be careful.
How did you respond to that in that moment?
Well, I wasn't, even then, didn't take too kindly to people trying to control what I felt needed to be said. I don't remember how I responded. I mean, I was surprised, and I made real effort to cultivate a friendship with this man, and I did so. At the time when she said this, I did not even know who he was. It was a fairly large church. I did not know who he was, but I made an effort, and he was a woodworker, and he made some things for me, and I think to try to do this. But I continue to be outspoken about a number of issues. But, a minister has to be careful.
Right. So what I hear you saying is that that's part of the job.
It's part of the job.
And so while you were serving churches, you needed to be aware that this part of, you needed to walk a line, right? But it sounds to me, correct me if I'm wrong, that recently that line has become way too clear. And with the current political developments, and even a new awareness and a new action was called for in your life.
Yes, you know, I just turned 75, and the older you get, the freer you are to say what you think.
That's good to hear.
And, you know, when you retire, and your financial stability is not really dependent upon other people, tobacco barn owners, supporting you, that also gives you a freedom to say what you think. Then, of course, in the last few years, the whole movement of so many Christians to embrace a form of political structure in our country, which I think is problematic. This has created a new challenge to ministers. With how radical Donald Trump is about what he's doing to immigrants, what he's doing to people of color. This has been a real challenge. And so I was in this small church and I was trying to preach during the political campaign, and it did not sit well with everybody.
Which political campaign was this?
The one just last fall.
Okay.
Last fall. So as the campaign heated up toward the 1st of November, I was preaching about these things, and a few people in the church took exception to it, and they began to boycott the services.
Have you ever been boycotted before?
Well, I'm sure I have, but our church, the church I was in was so small. For instance, there were 2 people that boycotted, but we normally only had 25 people in the service, so that's almost 10% of your congregation.
Right.
And 10% in any size is a noticeable absence.
Sure.
And I noticed that these people had stopped coming to the worship services.
Did they talk to you about it, or did
No.
they just stop coming?
No, they just stopped coming, which is typical.
Right.
Rather than, coming in and talk to the pastor and saying, gee, I've got some issues here, have you thought about that, or, you're making me uncomfortable, or rather than, most church members do not do that.
Why do you think that is?
Well, they don't want to cause a problem. They don't want to get on the bad side of the preacher. But I don't know. I don't know all the issues. Some people know that boycotting things is a powerful way to influence things. I may come back to that in a minute. That boycotting a particular vendor or a particular event is a way to make a powerful political point without personal confrontation. So this happens in churches all the time.
So you were boycotted?
I was boycotted, and I didn't want to cause a problem in the church, so I decided to resign because God had been working in my life in this other direction anyway. So the last Sunday of December of 24 was my last Sunday at the little church. And it ended on a happy note. I love the people. As a matter of fact, I think we are going back next Sunday to be part of a service honoring the founder of the church. The very next Sunday, I started something new that I had never done before. This is what I want to tell you about. Yeah. In the United States, they tell us that there are 40 million people who have quit church. In the professional lingo, this is called the de-churched population. It's different than the unchurched population. The unchurched are people who have never been in church, didn't grow up in a Christian home, never baptized, and there are a lot of people in that category. But there are 40 million people who had some exposure and attachment activity in a church of some kind and have now quit. One article listed 13 reasons why people quit churches, but basically they are people, develops a resistance to what the church is teaching. Now, sometimes that's because the church teaches crazy things, like you've got to cut your hair, or that sort of thing. And sometimes it's because the individual changes in their convictions about things, and they no longer can embrace what the church is teaching and preaching. This happens a lot. And then, of course, other people leave the church because of a bad experience. They are abused by somebody. There's a big wave of revelations now about sexual abuse in both Protestant and Catholic churches. Many people push back against the authoritarian nature of church life. And we talked yesterday about TikTok. One of the interesting things about the TikTok videos is that there's whole streams of hundreds of people giving their personal testimony of why they are leaving the church. And it is almost always to get away from the controlling power of a church, telling you who you can marry or what to believe or what you have to, what you wear and how you wear your hair and what you can read and what you can say and who you vote for. I mean, churches are like this. And I've watched scores of these testimonies of people leaving church. The Mormon church, the Catholic church, the evangelical church, one last week, the Jehovah's Witnesses. These are very controlling churches, so people drop out. And I had a number, several couples in this, in where I was living come and talk to me about this. And I could tell that they were not interested in church. They were interested in being a Christian, and they were interested in pushing back against Trumpism. So the first Sunday of this year, I started something new. I started a social media broadcast on Sunday morning, which I call Sunday in the House. It's a 30-minute program, and the best way I can summarize it is that it is me talking into the camera, saying we need less Trump and more Jesus.
You actually say that.
I actually say this. I actually say this, and I'm very clear about it because I think Trump and what he is doing is a dramatic and powerful threat to American democracy.
So when you say less Trump, I want to be clear what the less and the more is.
Yeah.
Less Trump and more Jesus. What do you mean?
I think we ought to be less infatuated with Trump. I think we ought to give Trump less support. I think we ought to demote Trump.
You mean less executive power for Trump?
Well, I think we ought to quit voting for him, number one.
Okay.
I think we ought to quit supporting what he does. I think we should protest. And I tell my people about, on the broadcast, here are 5 things that we need to do. We need to march. We need to join the street protest. We need to boycott. And we boycott the people and the stores and the events that support Trump. We need to strike. Now, there hasn't been a strike yet, but it's coming. There's going to be a national strike as a way to protest. We need to vote, and today, April the 1st, there are several, it's the first Tuesday in April, so there's a congressional election 2 in Florida, 1 in New York, and a Supreme Court election in Wisconsin.
You're not fooling us now.
No, I'm not, this is not.
It's happened once already.
So once already today. No, so people need to vote, and then we need to pray. Those are the 5 things that I call the people to do as we push back against the authoritarian and dictatorial and oligarchical regime that is now in Washington.
So last night when we were talking,
Yeah.
we started this conversation, and I'm grateful we can continue it. You said something like an analogy, like you're meeting people who find themselves in a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
And they thought they were going into an open highway.
Yes.
Or an open field or something where there'd be freedom and
Right.
what they need. And they find themselves in this cramped space. Can you speak about that?
Yes. What I mean by that is Trump and all political leaders think that they're taking people on a broad highway to a better future. This is what political leaders do. It's what they're supposed to do. And so when you follow a political leader, whether it's a mayor or a governor or a president, you think that you're headed into a really good future. But I think what Trump has done is led his people and led all of us into a place that is increasingly problematic and not where the people thought we were going to go. Nobody thought we were going to blow up our alliances with Europe and Canada and Mexico. Nobody really thought, even though he said it, that we were going to put all these tariffs on all the products coming in from the world. Nobody really thought we were going to take decent, hardworking American residents and swoop them up and putting them in El Salvador prisons.
You're talking about ICE.
ICE. You know, it's one thing to control the border. I think we're all in favor of that. So I think he's taken us to places nobody thought he was going to blow up every federal agency, Social Security, and all of the cancer research that's going on. Everybody fired, dismissed. Nobody thought this was going to happen. So this has brought people into what I call a cul-de-sac. That is, they're trapped in a place that they don't want to be. Even a lot of defenders of Trump, and they're looking for a way out. So I'll come back to this idea in just a minute. So I started this broadcast to try to articulate, first of all, to have a free voice. People can turn off YouTube and walk away and never listen to me, and I won't know about it. I've got a network of supporters who send me money to pay for the expenses of all of this. I hired a videography team to bring really good cameras, and we meet on Sunday morning and try to do a really good, create a good product. But I do these things every Sunday morning. It's called Sunday in the House because I have a media platform called The Meeting House, Conversations on Religion and American Life. Meetinghouse.net is my website. I've been interviewing people like you're doing right now since 1998. I've done a radio show, a television show.
So you're familiar with the media?
I am. I'm very familiar with it. So I respond to people. Here's what's happened since I launched this thing. I do not know anybody who's doing what I'm doing. In this 30-minute program, I don't have any religious rituals. I don't do any liturgical things. I don't pray. We don't have contemplative practices like you do here. We don't have music. That is, I don't try to replicate a worship service or a devotional time.
Tell us what you do want to do with this program? What's your goal? What's your
Okay,
goal?
my goal is to articulate for many people a way to be a Christian, even though you're not connected with a church, and a way to push back against the Christian community in America that is in love with Donald Trump.
So you see the two as
I see them right there.
right.
And this past Sunday, I got out my book. Now, one of the things that I do is I focus on what I call the red letter Jesus.
For those people that don't know what that is.
They don't.
what is
So
that?
this is why I brought my Bible. This was one of my dad's Bibles. This is a New Testament, a leather, and in it the words of Jesus are printed in red. Printed in red. Now I used to think this was kind of goofy. I did, but now not anymore. And I will confess this. I have dozens of Bibles in my possession, in my library, and I decided that I wanted just the words of Jesus in this Bible. So I took this New Testament, and I'm going to make a confession here in
Let
public.
me put my priestly robes on. So
Yes,
you can
yes, you're going to have to forgive me, my Father, for I've sinned. I actually tore out of this book everything except the life of Jesus. I tore out all the letters of Paul, the Revelation, and James, and Hebrews. I tore it all out. Not to show disrespect, but so that I could focus on the red letter words of Jesus. Because when you read the literature that's written by Trumpian Christians, they never talk about Jesus. When you listen to the sermons of people who are Trumpian Christians, they never take a text from the life of Jesus. They'll quote Moses, they'll go to St. Paul, they'll go to Isaiah, all great texts. But they cannot find in Jesus, in his words, in his demeanor, in his behavior, his deeds, things that support what Donald Trump is doing.
Right.
It's one of the most striking things about their religion. They have stripped Jesus out of their Christianity. And I decided, I'm not, this did not originate with me. The Red Letter Jesus movement started about the year 2000. A man by the name of Tony Campolo, if you're familiar with that name, he
Used to be
died.
my teacher.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, he was the one that popularized this view. Jim Wallace, who led Sojourners. You familiar with this?
Shane Claiborne.
Shane Claiborne now.
Phyllis Tickle.
All of these people were part of the Red Letter movement.
True.
And so what I do on Sunday morning is do a Red Letter lesson.
Nice.
So I'm going to read you what I read Sunday.
Okay.
I have never preached a sermon on this. It never stood out to me the way it does now. You remember when Jesus was born in Bethlehem because of something a political leader did. The Caesar Augustus sent out a decree that everybody should be enrolled. That is, it was a political leader's decision that made Mary and Joseph go from Nazareth down to Bethlehem. And then a couple of years later, it was another political leader's decision, threatened by Jesus, King of the Jews. He wanted to kill all the babies. And so Joseph and Mary and Jesus became refugees. Again, it intersects with where we are today. So they had to flee and go to Egypt. And then that's where this narrative picks up. And I'm going to read it to you. When Herod was dead, an angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt, saying, "Get up, take that young child Jesus and his mother Mary, and go back to Israel, for the people are dead who were trying to kill you." So here we are, another political decision, another shift in political leadership generated a conviction that he needed to go. And so Joseph got up, took the young child and his mother, came into the land of Israel by the Via Maris, the road that goes through Gaza from Egypt up to Israel. But when Joseph heard that Archelaus was the reigning power in Judea in place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go there. So here again we're going to see where the location of Jesus' upbringing was triggered by a political decision of a mean and vicious leader who was trying to abuse people. Sound familiar?
Oh my.
Oh my. He was afraid to go there, but being warned of God in a dream. So he turned aside from going, you know, the Via Maris comes up the coastline, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Tel Aviv, although Tel Aviv was not there. He wanted to turn and go up the hill country to Jerusalem and Bethlehem. But because Archelaus was there, he decided to continue on up the coast, go through the great pass at Megiddo into the plain of Jezreel. And he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, all of it triggered by who was in political charge of this area versus that area.
So how do you see, you said this, you've never read it quite this way.
Right.
How does that impact you now today, reading that as you did?
Well, first of all, it teaches me at age 75, I'm still learning to see things in Scripture that I never saw before.
And what are you seeing that you didn't see before?
Well, I'm seeing that our situation here now, again, offers striking parallels to what is recorded in the life of Jesus. For instance, last week, the most tragic thing that happened in America was when ICE agents dressed in black with hoods on their face. Whoever saw that in America?
Yeah.
Except they were white and pointed.
Yeah.
Surrounded this innocent scholar,
As a young woman?
a young woman,
Right.
working on a PhD degree. You just finished yours. She's trying to finish hers up at Tufts.
Yep.
She was leaving her apartment to go break the Ramadan fast.
Yeah.
Not a threat to anybody. They arrested her, literally put her in handcuffs.
Like 6 of them surrounded.
6 of them.
Right. Yeah.
And I said to my people on Sunday, there's a text in Scripture just like this. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, at night, to disguise and hide themselves, they gathered around Jesus, who was innocent, who was not a threat to anybody. They arrested him and carried him off, just like they did this.
They disappeared Jesus like
They
ICE
disappeared
disappeared.
Jesus just like they are disappearing all these exact same things.
yeah.
And I had never read the arrest of Jesus in that way before. So this is what I do now on Sunday. And I have now a congregation of about 200 people. All over the country, from New Hampshire to Texas to California to Washington to Florida to New Jersey, New York City.
So we're going to wrap it up in just a minute
Yeah.
or so, but what is your message for those people who have supported Trump or continue to support Trump? What do you want to say to them?
This is a really great question. It is hard for Christian people to repent. I'm from the South. Southern white people have never repented of their racism. Not during Reconstruction, when they replaced slavery with Jim Crow and lynching. Not during the Civil Rights, when they started segregation academies and gerrymandering and redlining. And then in the third time, after Floyd's murder, I saw my son's artwork on your wall over there. When the country was again ready to do something about the racism, up comes Trump, who is undoing all of that, which one aspect of it is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, was like Reconstruction, a way to try to address racism. And of course he's unraveling it all with his white Christian base. So part of me is trying to challenge the Christian version of this what we call religious nationalism, challenge their version of what it means to follow Jesus.
Right.
By focusing and by showing them this is the Jesus we follow.
Right. And when I hear you speak about it, one of the things I hear, which is frankly rare, when you're speaking to Trump supporters, challenging them, you're doing it with love.
Well, here, this may be the last story I have time to tell, but a really unexpected thing happened when I started this. An old high school buddy of mine started watching. I have not seen this man since our high school graduation in 1968. I went on to the ministry around the country. He went into the military. He is retired commander in the United States Air Force, a career as a fighter pilot. In some ways, at the opposite end of the vocational spectrum. I mean, that's a great achievement. I mean, I honor people who do this. He had to have a lot of gifts and a lot of smarts and a lot of discipline and a lot of determination.
And courage.
And a lot of courage.
Yeah.
And a lot of success. And I honor him. But he's also a big Trump person. But he started watching me and I cannot figure out why. And he asked always very pertinent questions online. He'll send me a question about this or that, and I try to take it seriously. And I wonder if he and other people are looking for a fresh way to be Christian that doesn't involve endorsing what Trump is doing. I wonder if he also is in this cul-de-sac, trying to extricate himself from where Trump is taking all of these Christian people. I think there are many Christian people that don't like it that the wealthiest man in the world went into Washington and destroyed the aid, U.S. aid that goes to the poorest people in the world. There's something anti-Jesus about that. And even Christian nationalists know this. I think that going in there and blowing up all of the cancer research, there's something ungodly about this. Gathering up all of these documented people. These people are documented and they're going to school and they're working and they have children and their children are citizens, and yet they're ripping these families apart in the middle of the night. People know this is not right. This is not Christian. This is not what it means to follow Jesus. So as I articulate this with a great deal of passion, I think it's giving people an opportunity to rethink what it means to follow Jesus.
What do you say to people who are not Trump supporters, but on the other side, so to speak, who often say, and I hear this, I just can't talk to them. I can't be in a conversation with them. I have to ignore them, or whatever. What do you say to those folks, the so-called liberal progressive group?
It seems like every family I know has this dynamic in the family. Some sibling, some parent, some child is on other side of this divide. And sometimes they can't even talk. Now, I have 4 siblings, a brother and 2 sisters. One of us is a big Trumpster. 3 of us vote Democrat. The one who's a Trumpster is a very devout Christian. Her son is a preaching minister in one of the 10 largest churches in the United States. This past week, when I was preaching to a camera to probably at the time about 25 to 50 people online, he was preaching to 10,000 people in a sanctuary. The 4 of us, we get together regularly, 2 or 3 times a year.
Do you have any videotapes of that gathering?
No, but last Sunday, just now 8 days ago, my sister, the other sister, called me and said, well, we're trying to get together on the 11th of April. But my sister says she's not coming because your politics, meaning mine, is too radical. So I had a long talk with my fellow Democrat sister about this. About, is it a matter of politics or is it a matter of religion? Sometimes I say it's not that we have different politics, it's that we have different religion. That the version of Christianity that is lusting for power and is repudiating people of color and is blowing up public services, that's not my religion. I don't care what you call it. It's not my religion. I don't think it's the religion of Jesus. So sometimes I think it's not a matter of we have different politics, is that we really have a different religion. Whatever it is your religion is.
When you speak with your sister, the one sister, how do you speak with her?
Well, I'll find out here in a week from Friday.
Okay.
Because we are getting together. We really don't, there's kind of an agreement not to talk about politics, and this is the way all families are.
Right.
And it's not just families, it can be in your work situation, it can be your neighbors.
True.
You know, people put up Trump signs and people put up other signs, blue signs. So it is very difficult to navigate. But I think by concentrating on the life and teaching of Jesus,
There's common ground.
there's common ground.
Right.
And it has the potential to bring Christian people together. And to pray the prayer that Jesus gave us to pray, and to recite the verses that Jesus gave us to recite, and to tell the stories that Jesus gave us to tell.
Maybe you're just, in my mind, answering another part of the question. I mean, what do we say to people on this side or that side? Maybe one of the things we can say is, can we share a prayer together, praying the words of Jesus together, and see where that leads us, you know? Last question for
Okay.
you. This has been great. It's obvious that you have gone through and are going through a major life change. Right? How would you say this major transition has affected you, is affecting you in terms of your own heart, your relationship with God?
Well, I would say, first of all, that it has energized me. I grew up in church. My dad was a minister. I've been a pastor or an interim pastor for 55 years. It's a long time. This is a fresh way of being a Christian and being a minister. There's a lot about church life that is very dull and wearisome. There's a lot about organizational life, period. It can be, school life. It can be community life. That is problematic and trying to get along with people. And so it's not just church life, but church life has all those dynamics in it, making sure you have enough money to pay the light bill and pay the staff and making sure that people are with you and what you want to do. But here I am now using a fresh modern vehicle. There are a lot of people that are anti-social media. The big campaign against TikTok.
You're a TikToker yourself.
I am a TikToker. And there is a lot of animosity toward the use of the smartphone. But I like the smartphone. And it is the way that we communicate with people. It's the way we learn. It's the way the smartphone is perhaps the most ubiquitous now tool around the world, from the very poor to the very rich. It's the way we communicate. It's the way we learn. I've started cooking more in my old age, and I get everything off of my iPad and my iPhone. So using social media as a platform for God's grace, for the teaching and life of Jesus, for exercising my gifts and calling in a way that's reaching people who have given up on all other forms of the church.
So you've become re-energized.
I am re-energized.
And partly in a response to what you're called Trumpism and the need to respond to this through the lens of the gospel.
It's pushed me into a place, into a calling, into a track that I never dreamed of doing.
Right. I didn't know you before, when you were a young man, but I can clearly sense the energy is now present and just bursting. This, and very often in conversation like this, the question of, where do you see hope, where glimmers of hope appear? And clearly, it seems to me that your program, your new way of being in the world, so to speak, your new way of sharing the gospel is a glimmer of hope here.
It's a small candle in the darkness.
Yeah.
It's just a candle.
Yeah.
And I've been doing this now 13 weeks.
Right.
I made a pledge on Sunday that if God gives me strength and vision, I'll continue for the upcoming year.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows how long we can do this? Who knows how many lives can be touched?
Mm-hmm.
How this might inspire other people to take up their phone. I started in my kitchen at my kitchen table with my iPhone.
Right.
On a little stand. I started this Sunday in the House. It's on my Facebook page, it's on my website, themeetinghouse.net, and it's on my YouTube channel,
Right.
Dwight Moody. So
Okay, so people can find you there.
they can find me there, and all of these programs are archived. All 13 of them are up, and most of the people who watch these shows do not do it live.
Right. They'll tune in sometime.
They tune in some other time during the week, all during the week. They don't necessarily watch the whole thing. They scroll through my program like I do a dozen programs a day.
Kind of like the John Stewart.
That's exactly
Christian
right.
Gospel, yeah.
This is just the culture in which we live.
It is indeed. I want to open it up now to anyone here. I wish we had an audience that
Yes.
we could immediately respond to online. But any questions, comments from the group present here? Any thoughts?
Well, I would be very interested in any of you actually watching part or all of one of these programs and giving me some feedback. One of the things that I do every week is respond to people who watch the show. They'll send me questions, they'll raise issues, they'll send me poetry to read, so I'm very interested in what people hear, which is not always what I say. This is true of all speakers all the time, but if you find yourself have a few minutes and want to watch it now or later and send me a question, I always answer these. You know, I don't call out people's names, but I do answer and respond.
And the live show happens again when?
It's 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, Eastern Standard Time.
Okay, 9 o'clock Sunday.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then this final thing, 2 years ago, when I was doing live interviews in a studio, I took my program on a tour. I called it a tangle tour. You know what this word? Zentangle is a kind of global home art phenomenon. And my wife is very much into it. And there are people all over the world who have hours and hours of YouTube channels about this simple drawing. It's a drawing practice, and so she's into it. So I called my tour the Tangle Tour, and I had 7 shows in 4 states with music, art. I took my son Ike with me, and he talked about his art. And I interviewed people. Well, I'm going on another Tangle tour this fall. Right. And in the month of September, I'm going to Washington, D.C. Do my show from Washington on Sunday morning, New York City, rural New Hampshire, and then Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Would it be possible to do one here?
Yes. Yes.
I mean, if we were to invite the neighbors in?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll be glad to talk with you about this.
Okay.
This past Sunday, I had the first live audience for my show. Normally, I just do it me and the camera and the videographer.
Right.
But this past Sunday, I think there were 10 people who showed up in the residential community where I live, and some family from out of town. So I'm beginning to experiment with doing it in front of the live audience. I don't know how that's going to affect the dynamic of it, but let's talk about that. How we can do that. We have to have good cameras,
right,
and good internet connection.
We have the latter.
Yeah. So that's what we're working on, and who knows? I've thought already about, gosh, is 30 minutes a week enough? Somebody asked me yesterday, why don't you run it to 45 minutes or an hour? And, maybe I'll do it twice a week, or, maybe I'll just go on the road all over the country and do it. So, who knows where this will lead.
Right, very good. So we're going to wrap it up. Is there any response from the group here whatsoever? Anything at all?
Only thank you for sharing with us so much, your passion and dedication with courage and articulation. Thank you so much.
You mentioned the word courage. Last week I wrote an article. Actually, I did a TikTok video with this message. Donald Trump and his regime, they've attacked immigrants, judges, scholars, lawyers, universities, corporations, executives, all around the country. It won't be long before they begin to attack ministers and preachers. And they will try things like coming after a voice like mine and stripping my nonprofit of its nonprofit status. This is going to happen probably within the year. They won't come after me because I've got such a small footprint. They'll go after you know, somebody who has a bigger hearing and a stronger voice and a larger following. Because that's been his pattern, to go after anybody who's against him. This is the way dictators are. Dictators around the world, from Oscar Romero to Dietrich Bonhoeffer, they shoot the prophets. And it's going to happen here unless we put a stop to it.
Any other thoughts?
Questions were wonderful, and anything I would have asked has been asked and answered. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for giving me this opportunity and for being
Absolutely.
interested,
Absolutely, very interested.
and giving me this opportunity to talk about it. Sunday in the house.
Sunday in the house. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay.